purpose for this talk, or where this talk really came from, was because I've been working a lot with our board. So I've now been with Brampton for the past year. And as Michael said, I have been in consulting full-time for about the last 14 years. Prior to that, I was with the University of Toronto at the faculty running the Professional Learning Center, which had to be a for-profit center. It actually funded things within the faculty. Prior to that, I did consulting in knowledge management with a lot of the big professional services firms. And prior to that, I worked in IT in SO. There you go. So that's sort of gives me a lens. Anyway, I've been working for the last year with Brampton, and particularly with our board, because we are one of 2 Canadian libraries with the project outcomes, which I am going to talk a little bit about. But part of that is, you know, when I first start to talk about project outcomes with the board, are you glassing over already, right? They start to glass over, right? And so it's really become much more a conversation with the board about changing our language, changing the way that we look at what it is that the library is doing. And I had worked with a lot of academic libraries and have been working with outcome measures really since 1984 in corporate, where it's pretty simple. It's return on investment and things. But in looking at impact, and I am here to tell you, I am now on record on film, that for public libraries to actually get to impact measures is going to take a very long time, because it has to be built into our partnership agreements from the very beginning. And it takes longitudinal studies to get to impact. So what we're really going to be talking about, and even though we're on camera, I certainly hope you will interrupt me and challenge me and ask questions, right? Otherwise, it's bloody boring for you, and certainly for me. So we are going to be talking about outcomes. And one of the questions I keep asking our board that I thought might be useful for you is, what are you really looking for? So what are you looking for tonight? Okay. Okay, so are we measuring the right things, and are we drawing the right conclusions? Is that what you said? From what we're looking at. Oh, bless you. Implications. Okay, if at the end of this you leave here with nothing else, I want you to think that there are 3 questions you as board and senior managers need to be asking all the time. What? What is happening? What activities are happening? So what? Like, what does it really mean? And particularly to have board members from different backgrounds. I'm assuming you're all from, any board members here worked in a library? Thank God. Okay. Bring different perspectives. And now what? Those are the 3 basic and most significant questions that we should ask. It doesn't matter what the hell the measures, the statistics are. It's what, so what, and now what. Anybody else? What are you looking for tonight? Greg, anything? Oh, bless you. Did you get that on tape? He doesn't want to reinvent the wheel, wants to leverage off of what other people are doing. Yes, honest to God, I am here to say the academics are way ahead of the publics in terms of not only that they have really a set of measures that they use, rightly or wrongly, okay, but also that when they do their consortia, they actually give up infrastructure. Now remember, academics are actually in competition with each other. Okay, remember that. They're in competition for grant dollars, and they're in competition for bums and seats. We, in public library land, are actually not in competition with any of our colleagues, right? Because we all get our own funding. But yet, we are the only sector, my understanding is we are the only sector that does not have a common set of measures. Even though the Koch libraries, right, everybody counts them and they all grumble, don't they? Be honest. You all grumble. You're on tape now. You all grumble that, they don't really mean anything, blah, blah, blah. It's dirty data, blah, 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 blah. Well, okay, we have to look at ourselves in the mirror and see who to blame for that. Okay, great. So 2 perfect answers. Thank you so much. I'll get you your 20s later. As board members, what are you looking for in your role? Right. How you let the community know what it is that you do, and how particularly you let the funders know, right? That's the story. That's the real, right, and how effective you are at doing it, okay? Great, here we go. So it's always important when you go to any speaker, and I bet you go and listen to speakers all the time, don't you? Okay, is to understand what their lens is, so how they are interpreting, what their biases are. I'm biased, we're all biased. So I gave you a little bit about what my lens is because it's been determined by my experiences and my background. But also, so there's three things in the way that I have framed what we're about to look at, which is I do think that it is incredibly important that we get to having sector measures. Before I retire, I really would like us to have sector measures that we have across the sector, particularly the North American sector. And that is why I am delighted that Brampton and Markham, which are the two Canadian public libraries, I live in one, I work in the other, are the two Canadian libraries that got into the early stages of project outcomes, which I will talk about. And I will also say on film, there is some grumbling about project outcomes because it has to apply to the little teeny tiny public libraries. Do we have any teeny tiny public libraries here? Right through to the Toronto Public Libraries, the New York Public Library, you know, the Fraser Valley Public Library, okay? So you're not gonna make everybody happy. And I say, God love us, in this landscape, if you walk on water, somebody's gonna say you splashed. So just get over it. We have got to suck it up and realize that it's not going to be perfect, but it's at least going to be that baseline. We need that baseline. Secondly, I firmly believe that we have to use evidence for our decision making. Plans are decisions, right? So when I talk about what the board's role is, any decision that you're making should be based on evidence. And certainly for the management in the room, right, it's all about what is the evidence. What do we have? What do we know? Because it is that blend of, I say, evidence, emotion, and risk. And also that there's a really key role for boards here in strategic decision making, in strategic decisions, and that is my real bias. So I'm going to start off, I'm going to talk about your key role as board members and how this fits. I'm going to talk about sort of how the measurement framework works. And then last but not least, I'm going to actually talk about how this all fits within outcomes. And I asked about Surrey because when I met with Surrey earlier today, because we have very similar communities, very similar constituents, and you have been putting together some outcomes in terms of your communication and also putting together the kind of communication. And I'm sure lots of other libraries have too. Here's my little disclaimer. What I'm about to say has nothing to do with Brampton, okay? It's from Rebecca Jones, who's been around 100 years, and obviously I should retire. When they give you 2 awards in 6 months, it's like, time for you to retire. And, and also that, there was something else I was gonna say, but anyway, that's my disclaimer. So talking about your key role. Oh, I know, the other disclaimer is, there is no doubt that some of you here are going to be already doing a lot of what I'm talking about, no question. Some of you are going to be doing it really well. Some of you won't even have started down this road, okay? Here we go. So the board's role, your key role, is 3 basic things. Ready to tell me what it is? You can either read it or you can tell me. That's right. Bing, bada, boom. That's usually the easiest one. You need to make sure that you have one employee, right? The CEO. You are responsible for making sure that the CEO. And the next one that usually everybody shouts out is that you are responsible for the financial and the legal oversight. So the fiduciary responsibility. The third one, and I won't look anyone directly in the eye. I haven't worked with any of you boards, but a lot of the boards that I've worked with, particularly because we did a great deal of master planning and strategic planning, the boards didn't spend a whole lot of time on their third and what I say is their most important role, which is around strategizing. It is around setting the direction, therefore understanding not only the community, but all the impacts that are influencing that community, right? Why am I starting with that? because that is so key to the actual outcomes and impacts, eventually, that are going to be meaningful for your community, exactly what you just said, and also for the type of CEO that you're going to be hiring, for what you're expecting from that CEO, and how you are managing the finances. Okay, so it all fits together. And so I encourage you, here's the second thing when you leave here, which has nothing to do with project outcomes. But if you do nothing else as a board, that you have a governance discussion at every board meeting. You look at something strategic that has nothing to do with libraries at all and has everything to do with what's coming down the pipe in influencing your community and the people that your library is impacting. Okay? Okay, because that is what starts off with our frames, right, and our mental models. So when you think about libraries, in Michael's introduction, he talked about the fact that we have for years counted things, correct? That really is our mental model. It's how much are we doing, and who, how many are using us, et cetera, right? That really is our mental model. And that is, see those little glasses there? We have to take those glasses off and break them and put on whole new ones. Because we need to start to frame this issue about outcomes in a very different way. Now, why am I talking about this when I'm supposed to be talking about project outcomes? Again, because it's really important to understand that outcomes are what comes out of a program or a service for the customers, constituents, residents, right? This is where you nod. Okay, everybody nod, right? That's what an outcome is. That's all it is. It's what comes out, what results of what your library is doing for those residents. So how we frame in terms of looking at those outcomes comes from the fact that for many, we see that the iceberg in which libraries have been inhabiting is melting, right? What are your biggest concerns about your libraries? Circulation's dropping. Good Lord, our blood is flowing slower and slower all the time. Absolutely hate that term, but yes, okay? So your physical circulation is dropping, right? How many of you still look at your physical circulation separately from your digital borrowing? No? Really? Of course you do. I bet you've got two different lines, no? You do have two different lines. All right, it's okay. Nobody can see your face. They don't know where you're from. It's all right. Have you switched? They're in the same report. They're on the same page. But in fact, you're still looking at the physical, aren't you? You're still shining a light. Remember, what you look at, you are shining a light on. So you're still looking at the physical and not looking at it totally in terms of borrowing, right? So our circulation is going down. In fact, your physical circulation is going down, has been going down for a long time. I suspect your digital is going way up. And when you actually look at it and do some deep dive on it, which we'll talk about in a little while, you'll see what the shift is really happening. But the shift is happening, definitely. Anything else? Anything else worrying you about what's happening in the library sector, community sector? Relevance, absolutely. Why? Because they're not only not taking out books, they are using books in a very different way. So in fact, people say, oh, you know, reading's gone down, the Pew Research, blah, blah, blah. In fact, if you look at how much people read on the web, they're reading a lot. How many of you have smartphones? Of course you do. And you look through, right? You get Flipboard, you get, whatever, you get your news, et cetera. You are constantly reading. But that iceberg that we've been really used to is shifting. And why it's really important is because libraries, love them, I love them, they don't have a great culture of assessment, correct? We don't do a whole lot of evaluation about what we're doing at all. Usually what we do is we ask people how satisfied they are with something. But we really don't do a lot of assessment. We don't have a lot of rubrics. We have great rubrics around performance appraisals, but we don't have great rubrics around our services or our programs. So assessment is not automatically built in. And there's the third thing when you leave here. You need to understand is that to get to outcomes, which remember what's an outcome? Oh, you guys are determined not to talk. Really? Really? Scott, what's an outcome?
An outcome is what you expect to get when you put out a service for a product.
That's right. From the customer's perspective. From the customer's perspective. Sheesh. Okay. So I said the third thing is that the outcome actually has to be designed at the very beginning of the design of the service or program. Okay? And where we put it is after. We decide to assess something after. Okay, most of the measures that you look at are past performance. In fact, we rarely set targets. How many of you, and if you do, I'll slip you another 20. How many of you actually set targets, other than financial, okay, not fair, targets for what your service or program, what you want to actually accomplish with it? All right, 60 bucks, oh well. It is very difficult, it is complex. And here's the other thing. Our measures usually don't align with our decision makers, correct? We always talk about alignment with the municipalities, with the cities, with the regions, et cetera, when we're talking about our strategies, but very rarely can we connect the dots from the measures that they are keeping and communicating and our measures, okay? And that many of our partnerships, how many of you have partnerships? I bet you your library has lots of partnerships. I can guarantee it. And I can also probably guarantee it that there are no agreed upon outcomes for the program as a result of that partnership. And that's what I said. We will never get to impacts unless we can agree that this partnership is going to go on for 5 years minimum. These are the outcomes we want in the first 2 years, and we are headed for this impact within 5 years because it takes that long for anything to work through. Okay? So anytime libraries say, we can't get to impacts because it's not all about, it's not just because of what we do. That's right. That means that we have to actually be in partnership with other people. But our partnerships do not contain even joint measures. Okay, enough of my lecturing. Through all of this work, what we have learned through many years of looking at, how do we get to these outcomes, et cetera, is that usually we talk too much. That would include me. That we figure the more we give, the more people will, understand what we're doing, In fact, what we do is we just completely confuse them. And the second thing is that, and we have learned this, we're much better at it now, and I suspect that those of you that are here, your CEOs are much better at making sure that the conversations with the decision makers, with the funders, are happening regularly, right? So that it's not just, you're not just whipping out this wonderful, here we are, like Surrey's wonderful, report on literacy, here we are. That doesn't come out just at budget time, correct? Okay, here we go. So it's hard and it's worth it. So the statistics and measures that libraries need. Pay attention here. So libraries basically need, so I look at libraries as they're just organizations, right? It just so happens that they are not-for-profit organizations. But like any organization, they have to know how much of what they're doing is being used, no question, okay? Now, how we look at that usage has to change a little bit, but they have to know how it's being used. They have to know the satisfaction measures and gather those in various ways. And they also have to know what the outcomes are. So we're going to spend most of our time tonight on outcomes, but those 3 types of measures are really important. They are particularly important for operational decisions, right? That's how they should be used. So they shouldn't, in fact, be used by the board. They should be used by management. That's how they determine scheduling, competencies, their portfolio. So their portfolio of the programs and services that they're offering, what needs to be fine-tuned, in fact, what needs to be divested. Any of them divesting of anything? No, just adding to it. Oh, good, I see nodding. Divesting, good, we want to divest, absolutely. And also how the resources are allocated. So that is one area that, of course, the board's going to be interested because that comes right down to the financials. And there's the financials. So the financials run over the whole thing. But we want to make sure that the board doesn't get too much into all that data. What the board really needs to understand is how all those measures, those stats, that data, intersect to bring the story that this gentleman, what's your name? Yeah, Jordan, that Jordan brought up about the stories, is to put those together so that, the perfect is that you get 5,000 people a week into our branches. And of those 5,000, 83% are extremely or very happy with our services, right? There's the satisfaction. Here comes the story. 95% of the participants of those 5,000 into through our doors in our programs feel more knowledgeable about, confident, and able to apply what they are learning in those programs. And that we're in line with the city's goals and that our budget's on track. There's a perfect board presentation, right? That would tell you a whole lot. Now, how the library actually puts that together. Greg and Scott, are you falling asleep or are you feeling tired just thinking about putting all that together, right? Because that takes a lot, right? You have to start with the end in mind. So sector measures. I said there were 3 things I wanted to talk about. First of all, your role as a board and the lens that you need to start to have on this and the measures, and then we'll get to the actual evidence. So I just want to start out with the measurement framework. Where's the last one? Hello? There, thank you very much. Okay, this is a basic measurement framework. You can see for any organization, it of course has come out of the not-for-profit, which is where outcomes came out of. You know that, right? You could probably recite some of the outcomes for United Way, which was one of the organizations to start with outcome measures very strongly. All the hospitals, everybody. In fact, libraries, very late to the game on outcomes. The rest of the not-for-profit or public sector has been involved in outcome measures for at least 15 years. And there are 2 areas that I want you to pay careful attention to, because the one at the very top of the measurement framework says, understand the context. And that's what you're going to be doing every month in your board meetings, right? Understanding the context in which the library is operating. So understand the context, then align the strategies and the objective of the organization. Identify the services and programs and the outcomes of those services and programs. Define what the measures are. Manage the measurement data. Translate the data into the outcomes and impacts, and then communicate the results. And those are the 2 that the board usually gets involved in, the understanding the context and the communicating the results. Can I just give a little pitch here to you board members too? See these 2 down here about managing the measurement data and translating data into outcomes? Very few, in fact, I don't know any public libraries that actually have an R&D unit. Toronto Public Library has an entire department that's their performance measures and planning department. But that is the only one I know, and they do a lot of research, so I have to say, take that back. I do know one, Toronto Public Library. I don't know if there's any in BC or not. I don't know if Vancouver Public Library does or not. And my encouragement to TPL is, and I know that Vickery wants to do this, is for them to share their research. Because we have no hard and fast R&D in our sector. We don't. The theses coming out of any public library, master's or PhD, we can't really apply, and we're not doing our own R&D. So, you board members, if your CEO comes to you and says, I need some positions around actually managing all the data that we're putting together, you sit up and listen and go, really? How would that work? Okay? And be very open to that. Because you cannot get to the actual translation of those data and those stories in a very meaningful way, doing it as an add-on, okay? It has to have real focus in an organization. And that, again, is where the academic libraries differ from us. Okay, so your role in understanding the context is, and this is your role in the community, right? Do I have any counselors here? Oh, I have one counselor. Okay, great. Okay, great. And you know that as a board member, you're not really a counselor. You're a board member. Excellent. Okay. And that means that you know certain things about the context that perhaps the rest of the board doesn't. But and the same way, they know certain things about their particular constituents, their particular areas, sectors, et cetera, that they bring to the table. So everybody brings that expertise and that talent, and you need to be putting that together, not just at strategic planning time, but all the time around how those other contexters, as I say, that are really setting the frame for the library, how they're defining value, how are they measuring what it is that they're doing, what kinds of outcomes are they may not even call them outcomes, but what are they actually communicating to their decision makers? Who are the stakeholders? Definition of stakeholder is an individual. It is not a mass group. It is an actual individual who can put a stake of support under what it is that you're doing or put a stake through the heart of it. And they don't put a stake through the heart of it because they're mean and they hate libraries or they hate anything else. It just means that their attention is drawn to other things. So they're allocating their resources and their attention to other things. And that stake gets moved and it starts to topple. Okay. So this is a really important role for the board, and it's to also understand the language of the contexters. And we're going to talk a lot about, well, I'm talking a lot, you guys are sitting there, but anyway, about language, because language determines how we frame things and those mental models, right? First thing that came up was circulation. First thing, absolutely, always comes up. And by the way, I'm not putting that down because that's very important. That's what people think about. But the language that we use, so when we're particularly talking with council or anybody in the city, we use the term residents, right? We don't talk about the library customers. In fact, increasingly in Brampton, we're talking about members. So it's a membership organization, right? They're members. But we talk about them as constituents, as residents, students. You know, the terms that are used a whole lot in city or municipality are sustainability, about growth. What are other terms? Yeah, but within your community. Real terms. I mean, think about every time you open a report, you see engagement, right? You see taxpayers, you see downloading. You see the word downloading, and we're not talking there about downloading content. We're talking about downloading the financial responsibility for things. Okay, so to remember that and to think about the language that is really common and that they will understand. Because those stories, if we don't use the language that they're using in their terms, they won't understand a bloody word that we're saying. Only said bloody, didn't say anything else yet. Okay. Because we cannot come to terms with new concepts like outcomes unless we change the language. If we keep using terms like circulation, they will continue to see us as the old bricks and mortar with people taking books, physical books out. And if we keep reporting on physical and digital circulation, borrowing, whatever, as separate, they won't get it at all. Okay? I put down here some of the terms that had to be changed, right? When the automobile first started, what do we call it? And no, I'm not that old. I've just heard this. They were horseless carriages, right? Because everybody framed that whole thing within the model of a horse. Kind of stinky. And it was only over the years that it changed. And the one I thought about was, think about how many of you had a car phone. It was heavier than your first child, right? And if you said car phone now, would anybody under the age of 30 know what the hell you were talking about? Oh, there's my second one. Right? So think about it. In fact, I can tell you anybody under 30 doesn't understand what circulation is. They think it's something that happens with your blood, okay? Rightly so, because we don't circulate things, in fact. They don't go around and around, especially when they're digital. Okay, so this is just some of the ways that we've been transitioning. I'm not saying that they're right. I'm just throwing them out there for your consideration. I'm hoping you'll throw some back at me, which is transitioning the processes to resident outcomes. Okay, so if we're talking about the residents, the constituents, the people who live in and work in our area, in our city, we've gotten rid of the word circulation and we talk about borrowing. Because it's not even from our perspective. If we talk about lending, that's looking at our processes. We need to be looking at it from their perspective, which is that they are borrowing from us, okay? Reference, what the hell is a reference? It's something that you need when you get a job, okay? Really, what we're doing is we are advising, we're answering, and we're interacting. Most importantly, we are interacting. I don't even use the word engagement any longer because God knows everybody uses it and it just ends in divorce. So we need to be talking about interaction. Gate counts. Oh, for God's sake, our gate counts are so bad, really. I mean, a lot of them are just totally invalid, and we don't want to be talking about gate counts. We want to be talking about the number of people we welcomed, right? The number of people we're welcoming in our spaces, and what are they doing in those spaces? And we don't want active card holders. God love them, they've got a card, but they haven't used it in 2 years. We want to be talking about engaged members. Okay, anybody else been replacing any words? You got anything better for me? Greg? Scott? What was that? Visits. Visits. There we go. They come in, they visit. Training, right? Absolutely. Skill development, for sure. Scott? Customer experiences, right? It's all in their experience. And would they, in fact, want anyone else that they know to experience what they have experienced in the library? Okay, we're here. We're at outcomes. So you all know what an outcome is. And here's my biggest thing is we, in library land, because we don't measure things, because a measurement, and usually we don't like them, but a measurement actually has a start point and an end point, okay? And because in library land we don't know the start point, it's been very difficult for us to understand the real meaning of the end point, of the outcome. Okay, so as I said, it is what comes out of the programs from the customers or for the residents' perspective. And I have highlighted some of the words. So it's what skills, what behaviors, and people always say knowledge. What knowledge do they have? No. Let's be really specific here. What, I say know how or know that. What do they know how to do? What do they know about as a result of that program? And that's what the skills development comes from, okay? And that's particularly, how many of you have maker programs? Okay, great. Do you know what the outcomes are that you expect from those maker programs? Anybody? There we go. Okay, put a little note down there. Because if maker programs aren't designed with an outcome in mind of that, a student or whatever knows that plastic will do this in a certain way, then what is the purpose of the maker program? I just ask. Okay, everybody's falling asleep. I'm moving along. Here's the actual progression of the logic model, which is that you start with the inputs and you end with the impact. And basically what this means is that if you think about it from the board's perspective particularly, we start everything with what we put into it. Those are the inputs, right? That tells us what the cost is so that we can actually do an ROI at the end of this. And we've put most of our focus in the last 40 years on the outputs, which is the operational perspective. So what did we actually deliver? How many people? That's the how much, the how many. The outcomes, as I said, is from the user's perspective, so what comes out of it. The impact is what changes for the stakeholders. So the stakeholders, remember, that we defined. So if we put it a really easy way to think about it is if you have a small child and you have certain inputs into that child, correct? You know where I'm going with this, don't you? From which you get outputs. Now, you have to keep track of those outputs, okay? I'm not saying don't keep track of them. You need them, and you need to do something with them. Because what we're getting to is to have the happy customer, right? That's the outcome. We want the happy customer. Had the input, got the output, got the happy customer. But what's really important, because who does the funding, are the happy stakeholders, right? That customer doesn't always do the funding, particularly the disenfranchised, particularly the youth that we are really looking at, for having big outcomes in our public libraries. It's the stakeholders that we need to make sure are very happy with what we've done. So the logic model, have you all heard about the logic model? Everybody know what I'm talking about? It's very logical. It says that it goes beyond documenting what you did to measure what difference you made and how your audience changed. Now, unfortunately, our logic isn't everyone's logic. We have always felt that if you just give us money, we all win, right? That is the simplified public library model right there. However, this is from Mo Hosseini era, who is now at Toronto Public Library in charge of their 100 branches. And when he worked at Markham in their Department of Culture, he realized that if the presence of whether it's culture, libraries, public art, whatever, doesn't add any value to people's lives, then the absence of it will make no difference. And that is really that iceberg that we've been talking about. So the change that we're looking for, as I said, is the skills, et cetera. And so it's very logical to look, as this moves along. But what it means is that we actually have to start at the end. Remember, I started by talking about the context and your role as board members in understanding that context, because where the design of our programs and services must start is over there, at the impact, at the stakeholder perspective. Where has the design of our services and programs, okay, that you are, setting the strategy for, always started? I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, it has always started right here. We would love to do that, but we don't have the staff. We would love to do that, but we don't have the money, right? Rather than what do we really need to be focusing on and how do we work back so that we figure out the resources that we need, which is to begin with the end in mind. So you can't see it up there. It says a public library, beginning with the end in mind. And this is an actual example. This is from Fayetteville, which is one of the really progressive public libraries in the States. And I'm sure some of your libraries have done this as well. So they designed a program starting with the impact that they wanted to have, which they know will take a number of years. And they have been able to get buy-in from parents. We actually in Brampton are starting to do this as well, gathering their permission to be able to come back to parents in 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, et cetera, to see where we are. Fayetteville started this. And so the long term is that they want females in STEM programs, right? We want females in science, technology, engineering, and math. STEM programs. Forget the STEAM. I know everybody wants a STEAM. Forget it, okay? Let's focus on STEM. Thank God you're laughing. Nobody's thrown anything at me yet. And so they know that to do that, long term, they would like to be able to follow these young women through their university education to see that they become scientists, programmers, et cetera, right? Midterm, and this is what we've learned from the not-for-profit that have been focusing on outcomes for years, is that there are long-term, midterm, and near-term measures that you need to keep. So that's why I say, when they come, when your CEO comes to you and says, we need a position around this, pay attention. Midterm, they want to be able to make sure that the girls, in fact, are taking math, sciences in high school, right? Because they're sure as hell not going to get into university if they're not doing that. And in fact, the library would be very happy with just those midterm impacts, okay? They know that to be able to follow through to university is going to be very difficult, but this is what really Sue Considine is focusing on. Because the short-term impact from the program, they all agreed on, was that girls ages 10 to 12 would have some interest in careers that will require science and maths, right? That's the near-term impact out of a program that they would design. So the outcome, right, that this program has is that the girls 10 to 12 have an understanding of what various careers are available to them, and that they get a positive response from the program. And so what they did was they put together a 6-week program involving females, female engineers, astronauts, doctors, etc., professors, and had the girls 10 to 12 complete this program. The parents agreed to both pre- and post-session questionnaires, which we have also started to implement some pre-questionnaires. We call them start of session questions. And it also meant that they had to have the staffing in place. They had to have $1,500 both for the honorarium, for the people that they were asking to come and work with the girls. They had to line up those speakers. They needed marketing materials, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so they did what we want to be doing, which is to start with what do we want at the end of this? The vision, if you like. It really is a vision. That's what we'd like. They're happy with the short-term impact, which is that these girls are actually interested, and the outcomes that the girls were excited, that the girls liked from the customer's perspective, right? From the customer's perspective, they liked this program. The stakeholders are the parents, and the parents are willing to see where this goes. Anybody done that yet? Yes? Excellent. Tell us about it. Okay, so they're using the logic model for any new program that you're designing. Excellent. Absolutely fabulous. And our biggest obstacle is, of course, we have no outcomes around our services yet. So we look at where we're allocating most of our resources. It is into our services rather than our programs. But that's fantastic. I am delighted. Okay. Moving right along here, I'm not going to spend any more time on that because I do want to come to project outcomes. So project outcomes was started by PLA, actually. So that's the Public Library Association in the United States, which of course is huge, right? We don't have anything the scale of that in Canada. You belong to PLA, right? And they had tried this, I think probably about 15 years ago. They started a program. And you know, what happens is it gets watered down, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, the Gates Foundation came and said, public libraries really need to put some emphasis on this and get this together. So with that funding, they put together project outcomes, and through their research realized that the programs, and they are quite honest that this is just about the programs in most public libraries that have the biggest outcome and could have the biggest long-term impact for their communities are around civic and community engagement. You know, certainly Surrey is just like Brampton in that civic engagement is a big thing. 51% of the people, you know, almost 600,000 people in Brampton were not born in North America. That is unbelievable, and how young our populations are. Digital inclusion, or digital literacy, really. Early childhood education, which there have been outcomes around for many years from the Every Child Ready to Read emphasis. Economic development, education or lifelong learning, job skills, somebody said that about job skills, and of course summer reading. Now, summer reading. Summer reading gets tacked on there. Do you know why? What the real outcome is from summer reading? Anybody remember this? So when you're, you know, I'm sure you will have in a board package, you will have a results around the summer reading program. It is because the real outcome of summer reading is to stop the summer slide. There is all kinds of research around this that very few public libraries actually put into the emphasis, which is to say that those students that keep reading have maintained their grade average and their reading abilities over the summer. Okay, great. So in Brampton, we are really focusing on early childhood literacy. We are going to be focusing on education, lifelong learning, and just getting into digital inclusion. Why are we not focusing on civic engagement? Quite frankly, because we need to be putting the programs together. I'm speaking to the camera. Designing the outcomes at the outset. Okay, so this is just one of our questionnaires that we've designed. I put it out to you, that we took the questions that the project outcomes are asking and are sort of customizing it. Because, as I say, project outcomes questions are all about, have you, as the customer, from the customer's perspective, have they gained the know-how or the know-that, right, the knowledge? Are they able to apply what they've just learned? Are they more confident in what they've learned, et cetera? And we knew that we wanted to be able, so this is about computer classes, which are digital literacy. We knew that we really want to know if, in fact, the outcome is better employment. That it should be tied around not just digital inclusion. You can kill two birds with one stone here. So digital inclusion, but also has this course helped you gain skills to gain employment, to gain better employment, to go to school, to communicate with friends and family, because of course that is, you know, the biggest thing. They have family all over the world, certainly in South Asia, and communicate with government agencies. And we were able to come up with those questions because when we did the start of session surveys, we said, why are you coming here, right? What is it that you really want to learn? And a lot of times, they have to fill out all those forms, right? And the whole government is online now. So they have to be able to use digital skills in very many ways. So they feel more knowledgeable, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we also added in a question about, I would recommend this program to a friend, which is not in project outcomes. And we feel that that's really important. Okay. Oh, we also, one of the things with project outcomes is because it is strictly for English speaking, English as a first language, or Spanish. It's the US, right? So it's English and Spanish. And so we are just now getting into translating it into Punjabi for some of ours. But we also use the faces. So we put the faces in, right, which are the same faces that we use in our satisfaction survey, so that it's easier for people. And we make sure that we have staff with various languages available to be able to help with the filling out of the surveys. Whoops, sorry about that. Now, one of the reasons that this is a report from Project Outcome, and one of the challenges that Project Outcome has, so I'm just telling you this if you're interested in your library getting into it, the challenge is that the data management and reporting for Project Outcomes is limited. So they are using the University of Washington because that is where the Gates Foundation funding was for the the research work that they've been doing for years. And they are working on it, but right now it's very limited. So you can see that this is the bar chart that we get back out, that they feel more confident, feel more knowledgeable, et cetera. But it really only gives us those 4 things, and that just wasn't enough for us. And so we have, in fact, a premier license to SurveyMonkey. We're using SurveyMonkey. I know there's all kinds of other things out there, but I just wanted to try. We are planting seeds, and I'll explain why in a minute. But we wanted to make this as easy as possible for staff, because as soon as you start to assess in this way, everybody gets a little tense, correct? In fact, I had, I know one of our board members actually, they're bringing in outcomes into the organization that he works with, and so the board member asked me, what was staff a little concerned about this? And I said, yes and no. The way that we've been bringing it in is, I think, in a very happy way to get them involved, because as soon as you start to talk about evaluation and assessment, they take it as evaluation and assessment on their capabilities. And while that certainly is one aspect, it's really not what we're after here. It really is the program designed for people to feel more knowledgeable about using computers, to feel more confident, to be able to apply what they've learned, and are they willing to recommend. And then most importantly for our board was that people feel, in fact said, over 80% said that as a result of these classes, they're gaining employment, they're getting better employment, they're succeeding at school and communicating with the government. Cool. early childhood literacies. I'm not going to go into that. But this is our very first, this is hot off the press. Our board hasn't even seen this. So black the camera out. But we do newcomer bus tours in Brampton. So where those who are new to the country in the last 2 years sign up for these bus tours, and they go for the whole day, and counselors are welcome to join them, etc. They don't go for the whole day, they go for a couple of hours, and they take them around the city to show them where various things are. They talk to them about services. The LSP workers come on and talk with them. And so we ran it June 6th and 7th, and we used the project outcomes questions, kind of customize them, that they know more about Brampton. So yes, they strongly agree that they know more about Brampton. They're more aware of the services available. They're confident to use these services to become more involved in the community. Hurrah! They're more aware of the programs and services available from the library, and they'd recommend this to other newcomers. So just having these, the visuals available. So using the evidence. So I said that, my whole goal when I came into Brampton a year ago with this was that people were hungry for stats. I love stats and outcomes. Like, how else can you make a decision if you don't have some evidence for it, right? I think it's fantastic. Other people, not so much. In fact, we weren't even looking at any statistics. Stats were being, pulled out by the IT guys, and I love them, okay, but really, they were putting together the reports to go to the board, et cetera, but nobody was actually looking at this stuff to say 3 questions. What are we doing? So what? And now what? So I got the people that are most involved in the operations into stats, which for us are the supervisors who are in charge of the branches. Not the branch managers, but the supervisors who sort of oversee all the operations, right? I know, everybody's, really? Yes, I can't tell you. They are hungry for these stats now. And what we did was, and don't laugh when you see this, well, you could laugh if you like, but I said we need dashboards. You know how in hospitals they have those whiteboards? Damn it all, we're gonna have that. In every branch, we're gonna have a dashboard up. And I know our IT guys go, oh yeah, okay, Rebecca. Anyway, we have a dashboard printed off on tabloid paper. Yes, it's in paper, okay, fine, because we don't have a screen that we can dedicate to it. And who wants to look at that all day anyway? But anyway, it's printed out on tabloid and put up in the workroom, and people actually start to draw things around it. So we did it at the end of the year, so we were able to compare 2015 to 2014, and so that, and I go around and I talk to all the branches and I say, so you need to understand how we're making decisions, like how we're making staffing decisions, how we're making various services and program decisions. So you ready? Bedazzled. It's lovely, isn't it? This is so it's not great. And you know what? They, meaning our technicians who are in charge of the operations within the branch, are starting to manipulate how we are visualizing this data. And in fact, they want to start to do more, sort of infographics around it. And they also have, this is the funniest thing, so they've worked out for certain of these measures, they have it live feeding. So although the paper's only printed out at the end of each quarter, they're going on at staff meetings because it's live feeding from our various systems. I know, but this is how we'll get there, right? If people are actually hungry for it. So it just tells them, and then they'll start to say, hey, wait a minute, how come the rest of the system is doing so many programs and we're only doing this or whatever it is. But we also started to look at what it is that staff are doing from the customer's perspective. In other words, the number of people, not coming into the branch, but the number of people that you're welcoming. The number of people's memberships that you're updating. Because every time you're updating a membership, it's a chance to upsell them to Zinio, God knows, could we call it something else, to digital magazines or digital newspapers or whatever program it is, or the newcomer's bus tour, right, if they're just signing up. And so we're teaching upselling skills because they see here, oh, well, if we have, in the first quarter, if we welcomed or updated 10,000 cards, 10,000 memberships, it doesn't mean that you just updated their card, right? You actually had to have a conversation with them. So this helps us around staffing. This helps us around the types of competencies that they need. And also the total product borrowed. See this? So how much of the digital is not applicable at the branch level. It's only applicable at the systems level. But actually what's happening here. And these are our Chromebooks, how many computers are being used, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, those are our little dashboards. In terms of how we're working with the board to change the types of things that they are interested in, that they want to know about. We talk about the residents using our spaces in the branches and virtually. So not just gate count, but these are the number of residents coming in and what that percentage change is. We talk about membership services and advisory. So not just answering questions, but readers, IT or technology and information advisory, interactions, the number of new members that we've welcomed, the number of memberships updated, the products borrowed by members, right? Because you have to be a member to borrow. You can be a resident to use the place, but you have to be a member to borrow. We want it to be an exclusive club. Residents borrowing products. This is going to be the next thing, by the way. This is still, I can tell you, this is still a blank. But we not only want to talk about the borrowing happening within our community, but what's the actual individual numbers of residents that are borrowing? Oh, eyebrow went up. Oh, yes, right? Forget that active card holder thing. How many people actually are borrowing things from us every month? And how do we then drive that up through those interactions? So out in the malls, right, when we're out in the malls doing various kiosks. How many of you have dispensaries? Kiosks, dispensaries, yes, kiosks, right? Hotbox, excellent. And the technologies that are being used by our members, and then, see at the very bottom here, revenues and expenditures. So the financials are right there. So we are keeping within our budget, we are doing this stuff, and then of course we get to the stories in terms of how we are aligning with what the city wants to be doing. Please don't laugh at this, because I know that this was my very first infographic that I did for the board. Go ahead.
Just to the previous slide.
Yep.
When you were talking about borrowing, and I think that in the libraries generally don't keep track of people who just walk in to go read the newspaper, to go read a magazine because they don't actually check it out.
Right.
But they are making use, and that is borrowing as well, short term.
Right.
But we don't count it.
Well, now we do. See, digitally, we count it. Right? So you can tell the number of times somebody looks at India Times on Press Reader. Right? So now you can. Digitally. We were never able to do it physically. But digitally, we know how many articles were looked at, how many, if they clicked on it and went to it, and eventually we'll get to where the academics are, which is, if you're on there longer than 30 seconds, we know that your eyeballs actually went over it. Or you got called away. We have no idea, but you're absolutely right. Digital is giving, and we have to do a lot more work with the vendors so that we can get the stats that we need. We can get, it's not stats, it's the data we need, which can then tell us exactly how people are using this. It's okay? Because I can tell you, our digital borrowing includes the use of Zinio Press Reader. It's not just ebooks, but it is not databases. Or as we call them, we don't call them databases. We call them either the deep web, which is what it is, right? It's deep web. or we call them commercial websites, paid-for websites. So I saw an article the other day on the deeper web. Well, we're into the deep web. Anyway, this is my first infographic, and actually the board, I have to say that it started to resonate with them. So to look at, because I know that at Surrey, you did a typical week. I just took everything and looked at it in terms of a typical day. I'm so sorry, I must be driving that poor lady crazy. Where is my tea? Oh, I'm supposed to be way back here? Oh, but it's so far away. Oh dear, I've been driving you nuts, haven't I? I'm terribly sorry. Which was a typical day at Brampton Library. And although the board was very interested in this, I have to tell you, at City Hall, it really caught attention that 5,700 people are walking through the doors at the library every day. We said every day, 7 days a week, right? We are only closed, 4 days a year, I think. 500 customer interactions addressing information. I called them do you know questions. The registration, the technology used, and that it came down to, if you want to come down to the money, it came down to $3 per loan. That's really what the cost is. When you look at the number of items, product, we call them product now, we've gone away from resources, they're products. Products being borrowed, it really comes out to $3 a borrow. Sort of put a whole different message on it. Yeah, probably. Yes, sir. I know, that's a branch, yes. As a matter of fact, I think I'm almost done, so let me just tell you about that. Oh, there we go. Okay, I'm not going to do the rest of this because I want to tell you about something that's not on here. Just a minute. Your key role, there we go. That was the last thing, which is all about the balance, right? That you need to be understanding what the small rocks are between the big pieces, which are the strategies, the CEO for which you're responsible, the financial and legal. There we go. Now I'll tell you, customer journeying, because I did a lot of work on customer journeying in the academic libraries. And so I'm fascinated by it, and I was fascinated that you had done some study on it. We have just implemented a product called LiveGauge in one of our branches. We're doing an observational study. LiveGauge is actually, it's developed by a young Canadian entrepreneur from Brampton that we actually met at our makerspace. There you go. There's a great outcome from a makerspace. Because one of the things we do at our makerspace is, which is one of the few, by the way, it's a three-way partnership between the city, Sheridan College, and the library. So we do these entrepreneur nights, innovator nights, and they come in and they show their wares. And so this young man has developed these sensors, and he was getting great press and great usage by some Fortune 500 companies who do big events. So in fact, he got the Super Bowl. And so big events. Yeah, have a look at him. Are you online? Yeah, look up LiveGauge. Anyway, and so what the sensors do is that they pick up any Wi-Fi enabled device. And there's pings happening here, very simply. And so it picks up those devices. And within events, so you can imagine, the big Dundas Square in downtown Toronto or the Super Bowl, they want to know how many people are coming in, but they want to know the journey. So they want to see where those pings are going, and they want to see where they're stopping, which they then call, so first it's an impression, so just an impression of the Wi-Fi enabled walking through, or whatever it is, and then when they stop. And you can set it to various lengths of time for where they would stop. So in the event world, they could tell what booths people spent the most time at. Now, Markham and ourselves are the two libraries that have brought it in to see how we can start to use this, not in an event kind of way, but to map those journeys. Because we know that even if somebody can't afford a plan, they still have a Wi-Fi enabled device, and that's why they come to the library, correct? They immediately go on to our Wi-Fi. And so we want to be able to see, the way that we've set it up is first at the entrance and around service points. So we can see if, in fact, how long people stay at a service point And then we can start to track back what actually happens there, the engagement that happens there. But we can also start to measure the effectiveness of merchandising displays. So merchandising displays, right, we are all into merchandising displays, are we not? And how we integrate digital products into those merchandising displays so that we can drive people, upsell people to the digital. And we can also see how long they stay then. So we know that certain branches, and we have started after-hours study halls at some of our branches that are being used not just by the post-secondary students, but by a lot of professionals who, of course, are upgrading, right? And they need, when there's several families within a house, people need a place to go and study. So we've started some after-hours study halls. But within the library, we want to do that mapping. We want to see when they come in, what actually drives them to where, how can we be more engaged than just a space, right? Did that answer your question? Yeah, this is just at in fact, this is just at the system level. This isn't even at the branch level. We need to keep digging down, but I have to tell you, although the board was very happy with that, staff was ecstatic to see, oh, is that really? That's what's happening around here? Yes. So now we bring that down to each branch of, the 1,300 people, 600 people a day come through those doors. What happens with them? What interaction actually happens with them? How do you need to be? And I say to them, every person is a service point. Eyes, that's a service interaction. Hi, how you doing? Right? We actually have, every once in a while, I take turns. I drive staff crazy. Actually, I say I'm the Walmart greeter. Hi, how you doing? Come on in. I haven't seen you in a while. And they're like, whoa. But they will engage. It is absolutely amazing. We have shown staff that if you walk around and you say to people, have you found everything you need? Even if they're deep in study. Excuse me, I don't want to interrupt, but have you found everything you need? Amazingly, they will say, no, actually, I haven't. Or yes, I have, or whatever. Anyway, that's the end of the official presentation. I hope I didn't take too long. Did you get what you came for? Oh, yeah.